Good morning. I was waiting for the thumbs up back in the booth back there, but it looks like we are good to go now. So welcome. Great to see everyone, see you in person, and welcome to those of you who are viewing us on the live stream. I always have to start with this gentle reminder. So look in your pockets, look in your purses, look for that thing that we love, our cell phone. And it would be great if you turn it off, but another thing you could do is just silence it if you find that you need to be taking notes. Because sometimes when you don't do either of those things, the clicking can be annoying to the people sitting around you. And this is such a great presentation. We do not want to have anything interfere with it. So guess what, members? We are 807 members strong. This is wonderful and amazing. We have recovered from COVID, if we can think back that far. Today we have joining us two new members, Jerry Hireman and Norma Hireman. I don't know if you are here. If you are, welcome, welcome. I want to take a minute before we go into a long list of reminders, just to thank the people. If you were able to be in the classroom, or if you joined virtually for the Ukraine pop-up, it was an amazing hour and a half. And I want to compliment and thank Bob Woods, who is in Ukraine with these women who spoke beautifully, intelligently, and shared with us a lot of good information. But then I want to thank Randall Miller, who spearheaded and orchestrated, kept us on time, and kept the discussion going. Judy Parr, the social subcommittee, Hannah and Amy. This was a feat of all of the people connected from Europe, and all of the, I believe there were 5 young women who spoke. They were not all in the same room, so they all had to be connected. And then all of us who came in virtually. It is available, I believe, on one of our channels, and I would hope if you did not see it, you should listen to it. It is remarkable what they have to share with us about Ukraine and what is going on in the country and how they feel. So please join me. Let's clap and thank them for this pop-up because it was wonderful. Now, we are so happy to have so many pop-ups that people are approaching us to do more pop-ups. So in April, Fred Johnson is going to do a pop-up on the rise of fascism in Europe and possibly how it relates to today. And then there will be another pop-up which will be a viewing party put on by Rhodes Scholar that will also be addressing some issues that may be on the minds of some of us. So that will be in April, along with all of our special events. So tomorrow, you can register for Art in Bloom at the Grand Rapids Art Museum, or you can register for the Lowton Glass Tour, and that is a gallery, and I believe that one is traveling to Illinois. And then on Wednesday, a week from tomorrow, I highly recommend you think about Tequanimon Falls and the Sioux Locks, a great tour. And then Wally Foo will be back for all you foodies, and egg roll making and taking will happen on, Wednesday, March 19th. We're registering for that. So a lot going on. You need a full Dutch costume to be there. Now remember, no meetings in May. There will be 2 monthly meetings in April. And you'll say, why no May? Well, it's tulip time, and the college has uses for the millers. So the April meetings are April 1st, and that's fact-based journalism, and April 29th, Ann Bonema is going to make an appearance and speak to us on empathy and listening. And then June 10th is Tofteland is the founder of the internationally acclaimed Shakespeare Behind Bars program, through which he has directed 14 all-male Shakespeare plays with prisoners. He has directed, produced, and acted in over 50 of the Bard's plays. For his work as a prison arts practitioner, he has been awarded 2 Fulbright scholarships, 2 Doctor of Humanities Letters degrees, and a slew of awards. And most importantly, Curt reminded me, he is married to Michelle Baum, who is Hope Repertory Theater's director. Curt is going to share a video with us first, depicting the work of Shakespeare Behind Bars, which will highlight the program's vision, mission, philosophy, pedagogy, creative process, and its artistic practice. Following the video, Curt will open it to questions about this important topic. Please join me in welcoming Curt. Thank you.
I'm Curt Tofteland. I'm the founder of Shakespeare Behind Bars, and since 1995, I've been doing workshops in prisons, adult male and female, and juvenile, also co-gender facilities in Kentucky, Michigan, and Illinois. I also run Shakespeare Beyond Bars programs for military veterans and for returned citizens who were members of the SBB Circle while inside. And we also tour a one-person memoir show called Othello's Tribunal. Shakespeare Behind Bars is an arts program. It's a volunteer program that we bring into prisons free of charge. We raise our own money to provide the service. And it's where I use art, theater, the collective works of William Shakespeare, and original writing to get at what it means to be a human being. It was about vulnerability, and it was about the fact that hurt people, and unless you figure out how to intervene, it just is going to continue the cycle. And so prisons are notoriously high in recidivism rate. So my interest was, because the arts had changed me as a human being, my interest was, well, if they changed me, why am I special? Why can't I take this into the prison and see what happens with it? So we've been doing that for the last 28 years, and the national recidivism rate's about 67%. Our recidivism rate over 28 years is 6%. So 6 out of 100 of our guys have come back to prison, most of them for economic reasons, because people wouldn't give them a job. And so they fell back into old patterns of behavior. And of the 6% that have come back, 90% are back on the street, none of them committing any violent crimes. Again, using art, theater, the collected works of Shakespeare, and original writing, we offer programs that use those 4 areas, those 4 pillars, to work with about 20, 25 prisoners over an elongated period of time. It doesn't have a 6-week basis. Our program in Kentucky has been running for 28 years. Program in Michigan's been running for 12 years. And it's about helping them to understand the world that they came from and why they did the things they did. Prisons are filled with trauma victims, and that goes back to what I said earlier, with hurt people will continue to hurt people. And so my interest is could we find a way for this intervention in dealing with the trauma to help them understand where the trauma came from. And children are born innocent, and they're born good, but they're not always born into great situations. And so they simply become reflections of the world they're born into, just like everyone out there is a reflection of the world they were born into. Doesn't mean they don't change and evolve as they grow older, but with victims that come from racism and poverty and violence and all of the ills, the social ills that we have, their trauma runs very, very deep. So I use Shakespeare because oftentimes the trauma that they've experienced, they don't have words for it. There's no language for it. Shakespeare has language for it. And so through the aesthetic, we find a scene, we find a character that perhaps has had trauma that mirrors that individual's own trauma. And then without ever asking intrusive questions, because the circle is always about invitation and never demand, they begin to work on this character. To understand the character, they have to unpack the language. They have to understand what the character is saying. And what happens is when there's a biographical connection to the character, something that happens in the character's life, that happens in that individual's life, that becomes a way of articulating their biography. What doesn't exist in them, they use their dramatic imagination. Slowly but surely what happens is by talking and analyzing a character, why they do the things, what's their motivation, what's the outcome of that, they begin to apply that to their own lives. And they begin to unpack their own life. And then through the circle of healing, which is a guilt-free and a shame-free zone, and they hear other individuals, other participants talking about their trauma in their own language. And it gives them the courage then to begin to articulate their trauma in their own language. And only when you can articulate your trauma in your own language does healing happen. Yeah, Hamlet. I use Hamlet almost at the beginning of every circle, because Hamlet says, to be or not to be, that is the question. And that's about choices. And then he goes on in that monologue to talk about the two choices. One is to kill himself. Another is to kill his uncle, who killed his father to become the king and then married Hamlet's mother. And he's in a moral and ethical dilemma. He's not killed anyone. He's trained as a soldier, but he's never been a soldier. And so what I'm trying to get forth in that monologue is, guys, because I hear this all the time, I didn't have a choice, Curt. I had to kill that guy. It's like, no. You had many, many choices. No, let me tell you about that situation, which then draws them out. And they talk about that autobiographical event in their life. And then we begin to unpack, okay, you chose to kill Claudius, but you could have chosen not to do it. And that gets them into the framework, and the way of thinking is, oh, I always have a choice. And that becomes part of their vocabulary. So that when they're out on the yard and they encounter something, perhaps something that's could turn into a violent event, it clicks their cognitive on. And their cognitive goes, well, maybe this is a Hamlet moment. To be, well, yeah, I could stab that guy. But then what would happen? What are the consequences of that? I'd go to the hole. If I killed him, I'd get more years added to my sentence. And it's all about unpacking the consequences of your actions and understanding that good actions don't necessarily reap good actions, but for them, it becomes the right thing to do. So that's one simple example of how it changes. When you change thinking, you change behavior. And when behavior changes, then the role of the program is to help them manifest that change. And what we've seen, particularly with violence, another statistic that I use when I'm talking to wardens or deputy wardens or even correctional officers, the lowest of the low in the totem pole in prisons, we took, in Michigan, we took 25 to 35 violent events per month on the yard over a year and a half to below double digits. So what happens is people want to work in a safe place. Actually, people want to live. The prisoners want to live in a safe place. And so when you talk about that, that's how it manifests itself is in behavior, and they become peacemakers. And the reason for that is, interestingly enough, it's a voluntary program, and many of those who join the program are already leaders of all the prison gangs. They're leaders of each individual religious sect. And they're big individuals on the prison yard. They have a lot of power, a lot of respect. And for whatever reason, they get drawn into the program and they begin to examine themselves and realize that they can use their power. They can use their leadership not to make more harm, but to make less harm. And it is, again, this evolution into understanding who you were, who you are, but the most important question, who do you want to be? It is, as I think I said earlier, we work with, roughly 20 to 25 individuals, because that's as many as we were able to really accommodate, because it's a deep dive into each one individually. I'm not there to fix them. I sit in that circle to fix myself. I'm there to create space for them to fix themselves by giving them the tools that they need to be able to fix themselves. Because that's the only way healing happens. Any program that's trying to change behavior has to do with when the individual makes up their mind to change their behavior. So we gather in a circle. We're usually in a classroom. And the first thing that we do on the first day is we create our modus of operandi, which is each individual gets a card. And on that card, I ask them to write the value or virtue that they admire the most in the individual that they are closest to or love the most. Can be alive, can be past. They write that value. It might be truthfulness. And each one writes their value. And then we go around the circle and each person shares their value, why it's important to them, and how they're going to manifest it in the circle. And then the circle decides, yes, that's something that I can support. I can support truthfulness. And then it's put into the middle of the circle with its, on the card, face up. Once we go through that process, like if truthfulness is mentioned again, it just gets doubled, tripled. It means it's really important to 3 people in the circle. I print up the values and I give it to them, and it goes into the front of their journal. Because one of the things that we do is journal every day, and it's about them writing to themselves. Some of them that are artists, that are writers, that are poets, hip-hop artists, that translates itself into art. But it's just really a dialogue with themselves. And then we start on introducing them to theater techniques, something the majority have never done, games, improvisations. Then we introduce them to Shakespeare and text. We unpack, I'll take the to be or not to be monologue, that we'll read through it several times. We'll talk about the definition of words. We'll start to unpack those things. We have long discussions about it. And then they go and each one of them memorizes or works to memorize. Some of them have never memorized anything. And then we come back and they share that. They share things from their journal. And it just goes, step by step. I don't really go in with a forced agenda. Because the program is circular and because the program never ends until I pass away, become senile or am kicked out, which happens on occasion. The prison will boot me out because I'm offering too much humanity to inhuman people. And then eventually it gets into a shared performance. We share the performance for the yard, Then we share the performance, which is my favorite performance, of where each of the individuals is permitted to invite a loved one or family member to come to the performance. After each performance, there's always a talk back between the audience and the performers. And then we start the process all over again, working on what our next production is going to be. Yeah, I think arts programming is a very viable programming. There's a lot of research that's been done on it. It's proven to be effective. But I don't think if you see, our program is voluntary. They get nothing for it. They get a T-shirt, they get a pizza party, and they get a bracelet that says Shakespeare Behind Bars on it, as a passage. And that's all they get. As far as external, they get no good time. But what they get is for themselves. They come to understand themselves. They come to begin to change. And then what we get is they're able to share with their family success. And perhaps they never had success in the eyes of their family. And their family, it just creates this really strong connection between loved ones on the outside and the person on the inside. And if they have if they have an end to their sentence or are paroled, what happens is it creates great relationships for them to return to home to, which we know in returned citizens, they need family support. They need loved ones. They need that in their life to help them assimilate themselves back in. There's an old story, an indigenous story about a young boy and his grandfather, who's the chief. And the chief says to the young boy, his grandson, he said, there are two wolves in the world. In essence, there's the wolf that's good, and then there's the wolf that's evil. And they're always fighting against each other. And the grandson says, well, which one wins, grandfather? And the grandfather says, the one you feed. So prisons are retributive. They're punishment. There is an understanding that there's supposed to be some, I call it habilitation. I don't like the word rehabilitation, because how do you rehabilitate a human soul? You can rehabilitate a damaged knee. So I call it habilitation. It's about what does it mean to be a human being. And so that process and that journey is what's at the core. And there are those that work in prisons, good people, beautiful people, wonderful people, and people that are there because they have no power in their life. They get to be in power, they get to inflict power. We're a guilt and shame driven society. And so they feel that shame and guilt is what changes behavior. Doesn't change it one iota. But they're there to make sure that those people get punished, which means they shouldn't have any rights. They shouldn't have good food. They shouldn't have good housing. They shouldn't have programs, particularly programs that are arts driven, because again, they're viewed as frivolous. But then I have these we've also changed the minds. I've seen COs that were the most retributive I've ever met. But over time, they watch the process. And the proof is always in the pudding, right? The proof is those men can leave that circle and go onto the yard and stop doing negative things. That changes a person's view of, oh, maybe this program does work and my life is safer, because nobody wants to be stabbed or beaten up on the yard. A prisoner doesn't and an officer doesn't, Officers want to go home to their families. Prisoners want to eventually get out and go home to their families. So it is about sometimes that wolf of negativity is in power. And when the wolf of negativity is in power, programs are jettisoned. We just keep doing what we're doing. We keep expanding. COVID shut us down, locked us out of the prisons. I'm still locked out of the prison I work in Michigan because because COVID gave the excuse for those that are incarceration people. the opportunity to keep volunteer programs out. They can't stop the mandatory program, but those programs are delivered by correctional staff. They're not outsiders coming in. And so when you lock an artist in a corner, they innovate. So that's when I created a virtual program called Shakespeare Behind Bars for returned citizens. Because the thing I heard from guys coming home, men, women coming home, was, you know, Curt, I really miss the circle. I miss that brotherhood. Just like a soldier can only talk about war, really, in depth with another soldier. A prisoner can only talk about the prison experience to another prisoner. They can't, their family will never understand it. They don't even have language for it, for the novices, the people that haven't had that experience. And so I started the program. We meet every Tuesday night, and it's national because they can be anywhere because it's virtual. And then I created one of the first virtual programs in a prison in eastern Kentucky, in the southern part of Appalachia, high in the hills, very isolated. And every Thursday I meet with them in virtual. Not quite as effective. I wish I was there in person, but I live in Western Michigan. They're in Eastern Kentucky, so it allows us in real time to be with each other and connect with each other. Then one of our founders, Sammy Byron, who's one of the prisoners that they follow in the Philomath Films award-winning documentary, Shakespeare Behind Bars, he chose to play the role Othello. And his crime mirrors Othello's crime. Othello smothers his wife, Desdemona, because he's jealous and he thinks she's been unfaithful to him. Sammy strangled his ex-girlfriend because she was going to reveal to his wife and stepson their affair. And he feared losing them, and in a moment of losing his mind, strangled her. He chose to play the role. So that was, I don't cast them, they cast themselves. That was heroic and noble in my estimation, because how many people could really face, in reality, something horrible that they did? When he finished in 1999 with that role, the role wasn't done with him. So he and I began working on a version called Othello's Tribunal, a cutting where he plays Othello and Iago and Desdemona. Then it led into his starting to talk about his trauma. He was abused as a 6-year-old, a high school boy sexually abused him at school. And then when he was a middle school student, a neighbor boy abused him. So he had sexual abuse that the first time that it happened, he went home to tell his dad, because you want to tell your parents, right? His parents were both alcoholics and were both violent, both verbally and physically. And his father rejected him, called a 6-year-old a punk, said he didn't fight hard enough. So all of that stuff gets stuffed down, deeper and deeper. And that rage came forth in a destructive manner years later, and he killed someone. And so he talks about that and shares that and unpacks that. And that took years for him to be able to get to that level of truth, to get to that level of being able to take the hardest look at himself and his actions, but to understand where it came from. See, I'm not interested in what criminals have done. I'm interested in how the crime happened. Why? Why is always my question. And if I seek for understanding, if I go the other way and say, you know, what is wrong with you, which is society? What is the matter with you? It only creates defense. But when I say, how did that happen? Can you tell me how that happened? It creates story. And story is where healing is. Well, that it's not frivolous, right? That art and theater's about real life in real time, and it's about being able to practice. I always say Shakespeare Behind Bars is a rehearsal for life. That's what it's about. People that are incarcerated many times have not come from, quote, what somebody else would say is a normal background. They've come from really violent backgrounds, and you can understand why they did what they did. And the question is, helping them understand what they did, then maybe it won't happen again. So So that's what I'm after, is that art, theater, and Shakespeare. And I do Shakespeare because I love Shakespeare, but because most of the prisoners I have dealt with have never read Shakespeare. They've never done theater. They've had a really bad experience with Shakespeare. And the fact is that I call it Shakespeare, and I'm going to eliminate your Shakespeare because I'm going to teach you the techniques to unpack the language. And when you unpack the language, the stories are there. We're a nonprofit. You know, the most important thing is we're a nonprofit. I've never taken a penny from the prison system, because the moment you take a penny from the prison system, it controls you or wants to control you. I'm a volunteer. So we're a nonprofit. So you can visit our website, shakespearebehindbars.org, O-R-G, and there's lots of information about the programming there and a place to donate if people choose to donate.
There is only one man who gets the ultimate respect. Shakespeare.
Shakespeare Behind Bars is back in session. Each year, inmates here produce a full-length Shakespeare play.
O earth, bear witness to this sound and crown what I profess with kind event.
I'm having a blast. I'm doing something that I didn't think I had any possibility of doing.
It's tough playing a female.
If you take smaller steps, it helps.
But it's something new. It's seeing what they go through.
Okay. You need to wax that upper lip again.
Shakespeare was very truthful.
If I put it in my batter, it will make my batter bitter. No more dams, I'll make full pitch. Got a new master, got a new master. Yeah.
A number of the participants in Shakespeare Behind Bars have committed absolutely heinous crimes.
I mean, this is Shakespeare Behind Bars. It ain't Mary Poppins Productions.
The people who need mercy the most are the ones who deserve it the least.
It's like, what more is a man supposed to give? When is he forgiven?
I thought convicts would make good actors because they're used to lying, but it's the opposite. It's to tell the truth and inhabit a character.
We are such stuff.
That's right.
That dreams are made of.
And then almost, it's like, how big can you dream?
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you. Sorry, I lost my, can you hear me? Oh, thank you. Thank you for the invitation to share the work of Shakespeare Behind Bars with you today. The last time that I spoke to Hasp, I think, was in 2010, and it's when it was at the Hayworth, and there was a person in the audience who was from New Zealand, and he had been an exchange student here in Louisville, and every few years he would come back and visit his American family. And he happened to be in town then, and the family was, they were members of Hasp, and his American mother said, because he works in theater and he works with marginalized populations in New Zealand, and she said, you might like this. You might like to. So he said, yeah. So he came, and I spoke, and he came up to me afterwards and invited me to come to New Zealand. So I expect the same thing to happen today. So I'd like to go to Greece. So, you know, after this is over, please come up and make the invitation. He went back to the University of Auckland and nominated me for an artistic fellowship there. And I went to New Zealand and spent time there speaking around the country, but also working in a prison. And the program that I started there, 2012, only with 2 days of working with those prisoners, that program is still going today. So my real claim to fame, you heard, I absolutely required that my spouse be identified because she has more fame than I do in this community, and certainly with Hope College and Hope Repertory. That's Michelle Bombi. So how many of you go to Hope Repertory in the summertime? Please raise your hands high. Yes, yes, okay, thank you. We need you. We need you. Michelle took it over when it was foundering financially, and she's saved it. Last year, saved the organization. She's very fortunate to have the great support of a president, the provost, and her dean. They believe in Hope Repertory, but not everybody believes in Hope Repertory. They think it's frivolous. They don't think Hope College needs to be doing it. It's a waste of resources. And so you as patrons have power. First of all, you have the power of your pen. You can write letters supporting it. You can write checks to support it. And you can go to the performances. Go to the performances. Because bean counters look at things based on numbers. And when attendance is up, that's a positive thing. So I can't stress enough about how important you are to the continuation, 52 years, to the continuation of Hope Repertory. And they have a marvelous season. I love that Big G in the film mentions Mary Poppins, because she's doing Mary Poppins this summer. She has a beautiful blend. My wife is a genius and a great leader. And she balances a season with something like Mary Poppins, which is very commercial, very popular, a brilliant film, a brilliant play and film. But then she also balances with the power of the Constitution and a spiritual piece that she's doing that'll be done here. And that's what it's all about, is to balance, because you don't have to go to every performance, but you can pick and choose. But please go and spread the word and support Hope Repertory. That's my plug for today. I have a piece I want to share with you that really digs deeper into this beautiful, I had nothing to do with the making of this professional video. It was a company that is educationally bound, and I was at a conference in Washington, D.C., and they saw I was coming, invited me to come over for an interview because they said, we want to put it up on our website, and we serve educational causes all around the world. I said, how could I refuse? And then I saw the edited version, and it's just a beautiful condensation of an overview. We're now all on the same page. You didn't have to come here knowing anything about Shakespeare Behind Bars and the work that I do. And by the way, how many of you, because we're a nonprofit, how many of you donate to Shakespeare Behind Bars? Raise your hand. We need more of you. We do. We don't charge a penny to corrections. We exist purely on donations. So if you feel so moved, please see me afterwards, and I can tell you how to do that. So my caveat is always that I am an artist who does work that is therapeutic. I'm not a therapist who does work that's artistic, and I never forget the difference. And I've studied trauma, and I've studied psychology. I've done many classes and many workshops, so I know a great deal about it, but I never equate myself with as a therapist. But I do work that's therapeutic. This little talk is called Trauma-Informed, Healing-Centered, Restorative Justice Practices. Trauma happens to everyone, but the way you respond to it determines its impact on your brain and your body. Dr. Bessel van der Kolk. Many human beings suffer some form of trauma in their lives, even in the best of situations. In the impoverished sectors of our communities, racism, poverty, domestic abuse, neighborhood violence, addiction, absent parents, and other societal traumas get dumped on our most vulnerable populations. I come from a place of abuse, addiction, anxiety, bullying, depression, isolation, loneliness, mistrust, shame, suicide, trauma, violence, and worthlessness. I am collateral damage ripe with despair. You can smell it on me. To survive, I learned to feel nothing. There is a living death wandering the periphery of life, carrying a broken heart. Khalil Gibran said, "Many of us spend our whole lives running from feeling, with the mistaken belief that you cannot bear the pain, but you have already borne the pain. What you have not done is feel all you are beyond that pain." A common societal belief is that children are born innocent and uncorrupted, but some children are born into environments that are dangerous, corrosive, noxious, and deadly. The adaptive skills that these children raised in the toxic communities learn are all too often survival skills, not constructive life skills. Richard Rohr said, "If we do not transform our pain, we will most assuredly transmit it, usually to those closest to us, our families, our neighbors, our coworkers, and invariably the most vulnerable, our children." Hurt people do hurt people. Nathan Phillips said, "Sometimes at the bottom of the heart, you just can't get the words out." Trauma is mental injury, not mental illness. There is no talk therapy that will heal trauma. There are no drugs that will cure trauma. There are no addictions that will abate trauma. Judith Herman said, "After a traumatic experience, the human system of self-preservation seems to go into permanent alert, as if the danger might return at any moment. To assist trauma victims to heal, they must come to understand what's happening in their traumatized brain while the trauma event is occurring, as well as how they are held hostage to treating cues that activate trauma going forward." Gabor Mate says, "Trauma is not what happens to you. Trauma is what happens inside you as a result of what happened to you. Trauma is a psychic wound that hardens you psychologically and interferes with your ability to grow and develop. Trauma is that scarring that makes you less flexible, more rigid, less feeling, and more defended. During a traumatic event, the brain is primed to respond reflexively to ensure survival. But that same defensive mechanism also keeps trauma victims trapped in the continuous cycle of traumatic memory. Trauma memory paralyzes us in our catastrophe. We become frozen in our past. Our personal identity becomes deeply associated with the trauma. Eckhart Tolle says, "As long as you make an identity for yourself out of pain, you cannot be free of it." You are not responsible for your trauma, but you are 100% responsible for healing it. Trauma-informed practice assists in unsticking us from our catastrophe. Sometimes in the middle of our trauma activation, a space opens that can create a path to healing. Trauma is healed in increments, not all at once. Over the healing process, we untether ourselves from the catastrophe of our trauma as we integrate our trauma experience and consign it to our past. Although our trauma memory will remain, our fight, flight, freeze, or fawn stress responses to our trauma will not. We give our past positive momentum through deep introspection, reflection, and finding our personal language for our painful emotions, pain-filled memories, and previous negative behaviors. By understanding our past, we come to understand where we came from, What values and virtues were instilled in us as children? What life experiences shaped us into who we became? Why we did the things we did? How we arrived at our present situation? Who we are? And most importantly, who we can become. When we unpack our life story with others and take responsibility for our past behaviors, we come to understand that although our negative deeds will live on in our victims' memories and perhaps in the public record, we do not have to be remembered for the worst things that we've done. Through accountability, atonement, and redress, we have the possibility to seek acceptance because our past is but a portion of the whole of our life that will not be completed until we die. One of the beginning steps in trauma-informed process is to address the shame attached to our trauma, which creates a secret world. In that hidden domain, our trauma and shame are kept buried, supported by our fear that if our trauma and shame are revealed to the world, we will be obliterated. We see our trauma as part of our identity, and yet because of its very nature, trauma is unintegrated experience. This secluded part of ourselves creates a living alienation that is difficult and often impossible to bear. Jim Carrey said, "The feeling of wholeness is a different feeling than meanness. To feel whole, we must let go of trying to maintain an image of me." Uncovering the source of our behavior is different from blaming our actions on past experiences. The former offers a mirror for why we are who we are and a chance to move toward who we can be. Whereas blaming our actions on a traumatic past assumes that our trauma identity is fixed and our human development is at an end. Carl Jung said, "Your vision will become clear when you look into your heart. Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakens." Penitentiaries, jails, and detention centers are sequestered, secretive, and self-contained societies. Penal institutions are our society's human scrap heap, the dumping ground and epicenter of unresolved trauma, shame, and guilt in our world. Prisons dispose of the human being, not the crime. Christopher Blackwell said, "The word rehabilitation is thrown around a lot in the criminal justice system. But the truth is that prisons are just about the last place anyone would expect to become a better person. Prisons allow hate and violence to fester and intensify. Far from being places where prisoners can reflect on their actions, prisons perpetuate prisoners in survival mode. To reduce recidivism rates, our American correctional system must focus on reforming the antisocial behaviors of the prisoners through security, safety, healing of trauma, purposeful activities, respect, reintegration, and resettlement. For human beings who find themselves confined within the boundaries of institutional correction, their innate childhood goodness still lives within them. Space must be created for their human goodness to be called forth. Viktor Frankl said, "Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and freedom. If we hold tightly to our anger and resentments, there will be no room in our hearts for love, and that will destroy us." A desired outcome in the process of correctional reformation is transformation. For the perpetrators engaged in the transformational process, the permission to dream brings the gift of hope. Hope lives at the core of human transformation. Hope is a memory of the future. Hope begins with the possibility of self-forgiveness. Hannah Arendt said, without being forgiven, released from the consequences of what we have done, our capacity to act would be confined to a single deed from which we would never recover. We would remain the victims of its consequences forever. Franny Lou Hammer said, I am sick and tired of being sick and tired. Shakespeare Behind Bars focuses on society's marginalized populations, including the disenfranchised, disfavored, disinherited, and those who stand with their backs against a wall. Antipholus of Ephesus in Shakespeare's Comedy of Errors said, who will deliver justice to me for these deep shames and great indignities? Shakespeare Behind Bars focuses on personal transformation by using the tools of art, theater, the collected works of William Shakespeare, and original writing to question, examine, and unpack what it means to be a human being. Ophelia says, we know what we are, but know not what we may be. Shakespeare Behind Bars participants are deeply engaged in personal liberation by remaking their lives as they seek redemption through redefining themselves by reflection, responsibility, reparations, restoration, and restarting their life. Caesar and Antony and Cleopatra said, make not your thoughts your prisons. Rather than recalling past traumatic events, the goal of Shakespeare Behind Bars is to establish a state of social engagement within a circle of truth. The circle of truth is a sanctuary of shared presence which uplifts truth, no matter how difficult, guilt-ridden, or shame-filled. The circle of truth embraces our core values of accountability, acceptance, agency, authenticity, confidentiality, empathy, hope, humanity, inclusivity, kindness, listening, love, non-judgment, personal responsibility, reflection, respect, and the art of silence. Sitting in the circle of truth, there is always invitation, never invasion, always opportunity, never demand. The circle of truth is a place where injured human beings can join in community with other injured human beings to explore the paradoxes of the human condition. Sometimes the human beings most injured from the inside are the ones most willing to help others. The true heroes are those who, in the process of bearing their own pain, lift others up and offer their personal reflections. In seeing ourselves, even the most shameful parts of ourselves, we know that we are not alone. In the Circle of Truth community, we don't have to suffer in isolation. We can sit on the rim of the circle and simply be broken until we decide that we are ready to begin our journey toward wholeness. Parker Palmer said, wholeness does not mean perfection. It means embracing brokenness as an integral part of life. Rather than questioning what the meaning of our life is, we must contemplate what our life is asking of us. Hamlet said, there is nothing either good or bad, but thinking makes it so. The only way to heal our trauma is to be able to give our trauma form and shape through developing our own personal language to talk about it and our own personal timeline for healing it. Punishing perpetrators who have caused harm must have a balance between accountability and habilitation. In the end, punishment neither requires nor brings about accountability from perpetrators. As those who have caused harm seek to reform themselves, they must reimagine their lives and legacy to include more than the worst things they have done. Constriction, driven by my antisocial predilections, culminating in an act of infliction that led me to this jurisdiction. But I say, I am a contradiction. I am not this criminal depiction, and I will use my words and my diction to make a positive prediction. My salvation will not be science fiction. I will own my own nonfiction. I will embrace my regeneration by becoming the creator of my innovation. Through the gracious gift of sanctification, I will make life than I am about myself. So I think there's a microphone coming around, so yeah, and is there another one? There should be two of them, because we got another question over here. So go ahead, sir.
Yes, how are the 25 roughly people that are selected to the circle, how are they chosen? And how are they viewed by other inmates, afterwards?
So two-part question. First of all, we're a volunteer organization. We don't choose them, they choose us. So it's offered to the yard. When I start a new program in a prison, I put posters up in the yard, in the housing units where they all see them, inviting them to come to an informational meeting. And oftentimes at that informational meeting, I screen the documentary and then answer their questions. And then the next time we meet, they have signed up to join the circle. And I've never, ever, in doing this for 34 years now, ever not filled a circle with volunteers. How are they viewed on the yard? Well, when you first start a circle in prison, anything new is suspect. And when you're talking about Shakespeare, it's like, obviously lots of derogatory terms are used for those guys that are headed up to that. And I have to say that, as you can tell, I am a Caucasian, elder, cisgender. You don't probably know this. I think over here.
Yes, I've been involved in Hasp's Oscar party that they've had a couple sessions on, and we saw a preview or a trailer of the movie Sing Sing, and I'm just wondering, is this movie about Shakespeare in prison helping your cause, or what do you think of it?
Thank you for the shout out to Sing Sing. It's a brilliant film. It's run by a dear friend of mine who started rehabilitation through the arts in New York State, in New York City, and they began working after we did. They took their inspiration to do Shakespeare. They were doing non-Shakespeare plays, but then Catherine Vokins, who's the founder, and I became friends, and I was now recommending teaching artists to them that were living in New York, and they had a Shakespeare passion, so that's what launched their Shakespeare contingent. They don't just do Shakespeare like we do. They do all kinds of playwrights, including original writing, which is what Sing Sing is about. It's a very accurate film, but it's not a documentary. It's a mock documentary. It's shot in documentary style, but they have Coleman is an Academy Award-winning actor that plays the lead. But the second lead is actually played by an RTA returned citizen. He started in RTA, and actually in the movie, he is enacting himself and his joining RTA and his transformation. And now he's on the street, and he was up for an Academy Award last night.
And that there are other similar programs. It feels to me like there is more of a trend toward habilitation.
Yeah.
Do you have any statistics or indicators to show us that more programs like yours are happening all over the country in any kind of increase?
Yeah, thank you, Marilyn. That's a great question. So when I started doing this work, it was 1991, and I started in a juvenile detention facility, maximum juvenile detention facility in Louisville, Kentucky. And then through the process of time, I eventually joined another program called Books Behind Bars in an adult male prison. And then out of that Books Behind Bars, 11 guys asked to start Shakespeare Behind Bars, which began officially in 1995. So when we got our first coverage, if you Google Shakespeare Behind Bars or you Google my name, pages and pages and pages of media coverage will come up. I have never written a marketing piece. I've never tried to get people in the media to come and see it. They find me. And I have found over the years that's the most powerful way to work. Let those who are interested find you. So when the Christian Science Monitor did I think an 8 or 10 page spread about our production in the Christian Science Monitor, it went all over the world. And I thought, oh great, now because there's no society, there's no organization that connects us, right? I thought now people will read that and go, oh, I'm doing this work, and they'll reach out to me. I heard from one woman who had started a program in a New Jersey women's prison. And we survived because the corrections officers there see the value of it. They see the reduction of violence. They see our recidivism rate over 30 years is 6%, under 6%, 6 out of 100. You can't find other programs that have recidivism rates that low unless they're an art-related program. Then you see most of their recidivism rates are under double digits, right? So now, and I've helped start programs all over the world. That was what my first Fulbright was in Australia. I went to Australia to work with a guy that had started a program there, but to expand it. So we've started. I think of myself as a generator, right? I just want to generate the interest, and then they don't have to do it like I do it. Most of them don't. You know, follow your own instincts, follow your own passions, follow your own, however you want to do it. So now there are hundreds around the world. So a great increase since 1991 when I began in juvenile hall. Anybody else?
Time if there's one more question anybody has. If not, I would like to thank you very much, Curt, for making us aware of the rewards that happen from a program such as Shakespeare Behind Bars. I think the reduction in the recidivism rate from your program is outstanding, and we thank you very much for sharing with us how you have managed to do that. So
thank you.
Thank you. And
thank you. Thank you. Support Hope Repertory. Get your tickets. Go online and get your tickets now.
So we have
if you
Hope
have an
Repertory.
interest in supporting Shakespeare Behind Bars, come on up. I have an envelope for you, or I can tell you how to do it online. Thank you.
Remember, see you April 1.
Thanks, Dave.